Before we dive in, I want to let you know about a new book you're definitely going to want to check out. It's called Why Brains Need Friends, The Neuroscience of Social Connection, and it's by Dr. Ben Rein, who's a Stanford-trained neuroscientist and the guest for this 3-part series. So if you enjoy what you hear in these episodes, you will absolutely love the book. It's available now wherever books are sold. Okay, let's jump into today's episode. Last time we uncovered the hard truth. Loneliness isn't just a feeling. It's a warning siren from our brain, as real and urgent as hunger or thirst. And when we ignore it, the cost is devastating. Inflammation spreads and stress hormones rise, and our very survival is put at risk. But if loneliness can destroy us, what about the opposite side? What if the very thing we crave, connection, isn't just comforting, but also life-saving? What if sharing a laugh with a friend, or even just being seen or understood, has the power to reshape our brain, protect us from disease, and yes, even help us live longer? Today, we turn to the other side of the story. Dr. Ben Rein takes us beyond the science of isolation and into the extraordinary neuroscience of connection. You'll discover why friendships are not just nice to have, they're actually essential for our brains to thrive. This is episode 2 of our special series, Why Our Brains Need Friends, powered by the MedStory podcast. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so of course, I want to do everything in my power to avoid or prolong the onset of dementia. So I want to get my best bang for my buck when it comes to social interaction. And an example here is I have really stimulating conversations virtually. Like I can have it all day. I can have some amazing conversations. But by the end of the day, when my girlfriend comes home, I'm so happy to see a human in real life, right? And I want to go out and I want to socialize. Where I saw humans all day. I just want to sit and do nothing. So am I socially interacting in a non-optimized way?
Okay, probably yes. It's an early science. So, one of the other ways that interaction benefits us, aside from growing our brains and all this stuff and preventing inflammation, yada, is by simply improving our mood. People feel better after they interact, and there's all sorts of science on this. Interacting with a friend or someone you really love might be the best way to boost your mood, but also you chat with a stranger on a train, you feel better. So the number one metric to look at here, in my opinion, is you're having a virtual interaction. Are you getting the same benefit from it in terms of mood? Is it affecting you? Because otherwise, doing the other studies of looking at inflammatory markers, all those things, I don't think those studies have been done. So I don't think we know yet. But when it comes to mood, people don't show as strong mood benefits from virtual interactions as they do in person. And it seems that the more lifelike an interaction is, the better. So a video chat will have greater effects on your mood than texting with someone, because it's probably because we're preserving a lot more of these social cues. I could see your facial expression, hear your tone of voice. I can see your body language a little bit from the chest up, at least, better than nothing. So my guess, if they were to do those studies of you put someone in a room for 30 days and they're allowed to have as many social interactions as they want, but they have to be virtual, I would bet they would show isolation-like changes in the brain and body. Like it'd probably be a gradient, right? So if you had like someone who could socialize for 30 days, and then the middle group is someone who does what I just said, and then the other group is just pure isolation for 30 days, they'd probably fall somewhere in the middle, I think.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. So it's like, this is better than nothing, for sure, but there's nothing that's going to beat the in-person interaction.
Right, 100%. Right. And the other thing that I want to note on this is so relatable what you're talking about. I work from home a lot of the time, and so I'm here all day. My wife's at work. She comes home. I'm like, oh my gosh, let's play. She's leave me alone. I've been talking to people all day. And what I want to pinpoint on that is that really reflects this kind of idea of like social homeostasis, that we all have sort of a set point of how much interaction we need or are best suited for. And this correlates with trait extroversion, how extroverted you are. The more extroverted you are, the more interaction you can tolerate before you basically get annoyed or frustrated or tired. And so it's also possible that you could go to a workplace and your girlfriend too, and you both come home and she's stay away from me, and you're like, I actually still am not like satiated. Like I haven't gotten enough interaction. And that's one of the big points I hit on in the book too, is I refer to what we take in, our social interactions, as our social diet. And I encourage readers to really consider how to shape their social diet with the proper amount and type of interactions to maximize, like what you just said, get the most bang for your buck without becoming miserable, because you obviously don't want to overdo it and fatigue yourself, which can be done.
Sure. Okay. Is this kind of along the lines of what a lot of people know as social battery?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess you could think of it that way. I tend to think about what I'm describing as more of a long-term thing, because the studies that I'm referring to, or that have fueled this idea, basically they take people who are either really introverted or extroverted or anywhere in the middle on this continuum, and they just say, hey, look, we need you to be as extroverted as you possibly can for some amount of time. Some studies, that's like a 10-minute conversation. Other times, they're like, please just do your best to be as extroverted as you can for one whole week. And what they find is that people who are more extroverted can do a whole week and they feel great. The more extroverted you are, the more benefit you get from that full week. But if you're an introvert, you are miserable pretty quickly. Like you're not getting the same benefits. You're much more exhausted at the end of the week. But if you compress that down and go back to that 10-minute example, both introverts and extroverts will leave that 10-minute conversation feeling really good. So, and that's somewhere in there is that social battery, right? If you're really introverted, a 10-minute outgoing burst is enough to improve your mood. But if you had to keep going, that threshold lies somewhere for everybody. And that's why for this idea of the social diet, one of the key ideas is to literally score your trait extroversion, how extroverted you are. And so I have in the book a trait extroversion assessment that you can take, and it'll like basically tell you where do you fall. And this is the same assessment that these studies are using. So it should hopefully be validated by those research studies.
So what's the goal here? Is my goal to improve my trait extroversion? Like where I can be like, you know what? Through a healthy social diet, I am extending my social battery, meaning that I can tolerate more social interaction? Or is it more like owning whatever my biology naturally is, figuring that out and working within those parameters?
Great question. It's definitely the latter. So trait extroversion is pretty stable. So it might be helpful to improve your trait extroversion, but your goal is to figure out where do I stand on this continuum. And throughout the book, I refer back to that idea of when I was in my high school or middle school or elementary school cafeteria, and I noticed the different tables. Like I had this idea of there was this social continuum, and this is really this trait extroversion is really that laid out in a scientific way, which is quite funny. But so once you identify where you are, then it's about making the most of that natural positioning. And so I've already gotten a little bit of criticism for go on a podcast, and someone messaged me and said something like, "That sounds like you're like pathologizing introversion. It sounds like you think that introverts are like gonna die." But the thing is, it's different, and that's not how I feel at all. And if you are super, super introverted, there's some level of interaction that benefits you, right? It's about finding that threshold. And for you, it may be 15-minute phone call or 15-minute coffee run with a coworker once a week. But for someone else, it might be that if you did that same level of interaction, it would be far insufficient to meet your needs. And so, yeah, it's about finding that exact kind of set point of where you feel best and maximize your own biology without overdoing it or underdoing it. And I think the vast majority of people, if really asked to sit down and quantify it, would find that they are underdoing it.
Tell me about the quantifying it, because now I'm wondering, okay, I can think to myself, do I feel satiated socially? But is there, just as someone with diabetes can look at their blood glucose, is there a way that we can maybe check in and see where we're at and see if we maybe need more or if we're content?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think until you hit the point of being fatigued, until someone texts you, "Hey, you want to hang out?" and you're like, "Oh my gosh, like this would be horrible. I don't want to see anybody. I just want to be left alone." I think until you hit that point, you cannot hurt yourself by interacting. And I think that's probably the best metric to use, because otherwise, I don't know, we can always make an excuse, right? There's always some reason why it can flake, right? It's, "Oh, my tummy hurts tonight. I don't want to see my friends," or "I got so much work to do. I really should get to bed early." There's always a reason. And the other thing that's part of the problem is that we tend to really underestimate the value of interactions. It's very common and statistically demonstrated in research studies that people will underestimate how much they will benefit from an interaction. And that's part of the problem as well, is when you're sitting at home and you've got Netflix on the TV and the couch is looking so comfortable and you're like, will this interaction really benefit me? It's really easy to flake. But personally, I can't think of a time ever in my life where I have gone, ended up regretting it. But with that said, I'm an extrovert. So if you do get to the point where you go and you're like 20 minutes in, you're like, I can't do this. This is just so fatiguing. I'd much rather be home, then go home. It's totally fine. But if you never approach that point, you may be leaving health benefits on the table.
It's interesting because I've gone back and forth in my life trying to identify whether or not I'm an introvert or an extrovert. And then I've been recently introduced to the idea of ambiverts, somewhere in between the two, because I find myself, I definitely get energy from social interaction. However, if I'm at a party, what I've noticed is that there's times where I'll be talking and then I say I need to go to the bathroom frequently. And I don't actually have to go to the bathroom. I just need a second alone where I just need to take a breath, recollect myself, and then go back out into the world. But if, as an outsider, they would not know that because I at least feel that I'm pretty good at hiding that. But internally, I'm like getting a little overwhelmed and I need a little reset.
Yeah, you just blew yourself in now. Everyone's going to know that when you say you got to go to the bathroom, it's a lie. When you do that, just out of curiosity, and you go take a breather and you come back, do you feel better after just a couple minutes away? Or do you come back and you've lost a little bit of energy? Like you hit a wall, you said, okay, I'll be right back. And then when you come back, you're struggling. Or are you like right back in with the same energy?
I would say I can get right back in it. Yeah, I just need that reset. Why do you ask?
That's interesting. I don't know. I'm just curious about this. I've definitely been there for sure. I would think you're an extrovert just from interacting with you and the fact that you come back with energy still. But I've never done that. I've definitely been there though, where I'm in a conversation. All of a sudden, like I just hit a wall and I find myself being much quieter and more reserved. And I'm like, I could say this in response, but I don't know if I really feel like it. And I just suddenly clam up. And I think that's probably me hitting that barrier that like my battery's nearing zero. But that's interesting for you that you can kind of get a quick recharge. It makes me think that maybe, actually, no, not even think. I'm quite certain now, just thinking about it, that's probably a frontier in this research area that I'm talking about how quickly your social battery is depleted, but there's also the other side of it of how fast is your battery recharged. And your battery might recharge very quickly, but others, because that's an important question here. I'm saying once you hit that barrier and you can't do anymore, go home, relax, be alone. But then when do you go back out? And I think that's an interesting frontier. I wonder if there's research on that.
Oh, we'll have to look into it. It's almost like it's going to like the Tesla supercharger rather than just the standard one to charge it up quickly.
The bathroom for you is just the supercharger.
My secret's out. Now all my friends are going to question whenever I go to the bathroom, but that's all right. So another thing I find interesting is that I find that I do really well one-on-one. Like I can keep conversations going, but as soon as it's a group, I'm very quiet. I much prefer to observe rather than be like the center of attention. Is there any value in either one versus the other?
Yeah, I think everyone's different. I think this is another one of those things where it's like, how extroverted are you? I like to think that biology, everything in biology exists on a continuum, right? How athletic are you? We all, on a scale of 0 to 100, we all land somewhere, right? How empathic are you? How empathic are you for people above 65 or people under 15? And what you're describing isn't just another one of those facets of interaction. How comfortable are you one-on-one versus group? And I think everyone's different. And I think this is also one of the ideas that I hope to capture in the social diet. And what that really looks like, by the way, is I have a social journaling template at the end of the book, or actually it's going to be a PDF on my website where you download it. And the idea is you come home from an interaction, you jot down a bunch of details. There's a bunch of questions. Who were you with? Where did you go? What time did you get home? What did you talk about? How busy was the place you were at? How many people were you with? All these things. And trying to pinpoint, like, are any of these things good or bad? Do any of them jump out at you as not ideal? Because in crafting not only your set frequency of interactions, you also want to figure out, like, what's the best case scenario for you, right? Friday night rolls around, you've had a really brutal week. You want to interact with people. What's your optimal scenario? You want to have one-on-one dinner with a friend, or do you want to go be shoulder to shoulder in a bar with a group of 10 other friends? And for you, you'd probably find that you've already identified it, which is great, that you prefer one-on-one interactions. Many people may be different. For a lot of people, one-on-one interactions might be intimidating. And so I think we may not always be able to pinpoint a brain system, what's going on, but I think if we can leverage that information and really grasp it, we can use it to our benefit.
I think we're coming up with a business idea here, because this could be something big, like how now a doctor can use something that listens to their conversations and then create a note for their documentation. I wonder if there could be a use case, instead of you having to go and journal, unless you feel like that's part of the process, to say, hey, I was quietly listening to your conversations. Here's the amount of conversations you had. Here's the tone that was in it. Based on the data we're learning about you, and here's some recommendations.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. I could see that working. Well, you'd have to go in and check in and report your mood frequently, right? But yeah, that reminds me of this one study that they did that. They did like half of that. They had these college students wear like basically a microphone. And instead of having AI do it, I think this study was a few years old, and they had human beings do it. College students, volunteers, God bless their soul. I think there was like, I think it was like 50 plus days of audio recording that they had to sift through. And they found that, for one thing, after people had interactions, because they would go in and report their mood on the app, their mood went up. And the longer they spent in interaction, the higher their mood increased. But the other thing was, when they analyzed the interactions themselves, they found that the more people had shared about themselves in the interaction, the better they felt. Something about vulnerability and opening up produced larger benefits. And this was, of course, it's funny because in science, it's what's the N value, right? How many students were in the study? Can we really extrapolate this? Could I extrapolate this to me? But the idea you're talking about is actually, it doesn't matter. It's personalized, right? It's, hey, we noticed that you talked about this and your mood was higher. That could be a really interesting idea, and maybe you're onto something.
All right, we'll add it to an accelerator. We'll get in there. All right, so this is why I love having these conversations, because I have my list of questions, but this brings up new questions for me. Nowadays, for example, people are having conversations with artificial intelligence. They're interacting with it. They're socializing with it. Do you find there being some value to that? Is there any research on this, or is this a potential solution to help with the loneliness epidemic?
There's a little bit of research on it, but not as much as I'd like, and I have a lot of thoughts on it. I think for some people, it could be really helpful. Again, everyone's different. Some people who really have high social anxiety, are very isolated, who struggle with connection, it may be like an ideal solution. But I think that in general, for the general public, I'm horrified of it being the solution, because there's some preliminary evidence from studies looking at like touch, like human touch, massage kind of things, where you look at if someone is massaged by a human or a robot, how does their brain respond? And the brain responds differently if it's a robot. There are certain brain areas that process social touch. One of them is the posterior superior temporal sulcus, one of my least favorite brain areas because the name is just horrible. And the orbital frontal cortex. Both of these areas respond to touch, specifically pleasant touch. And when they were being massaged by a robot, they showed less activity in those brain areas and also lower oxytocin levels. And so there's reason to believe that then the brain is somehow assigning different value to this is a robot versus this is a human. And I would imagine that a similar process is happening when we're interacting online. And when we're interacting with large language models, we already talked about comparing the value of human interaction to human online interaction. Virtual interactions like text messages are the least beneficial. What happens when you take away the human element of that? And now you're just having a text message with a non-human entity. It's probably the least valuable type of interaction you could possibly have. And I think in this era where I mentioned earlier, everything's being automated, right? We're automating everything that used to involve social interaction, such as going to the grocery store, seeing the doctor, all these different things. Are we now going to start automating friendship just because it's convenient, right? You can log in, have a conversation, log out. You don't have to say goodbyes. You don't have to go drive somewhere, right? Is it going to end up being more convenient for us and therefore win? I really hope not, because I don't think that there's as much value in it, the real deal. And I also think that it'll push us further into isolation. And I also believe that the decision we make around this right now, collectively as a society, is going to have a profound impact on the future of humanity. Will our grandchildren be seeing AI therapists or have human-like AI-powered best friends? I think that the way we engage today as the first generation to encounter these humanoid robot things is very important. And I think that AIs, obviously, these large language models, the chatbot, they have a lot of value. but I don't think friendship should be one of those values.
I think this highlights how important something like getting this message in your book out to as many people as possible to be like, we need to go human first. Yeah. Wow. I agree. I'm scared for the future, especially just the way our society works. Like the money is going to go towards these scalable technologies. And if they find ways to make money with it, that's just how it's going to go. But what it comes down to is that we got to educate and help people understand what the difference is between the two and actually why this is a big deal. With that being said, why do you think, for example, compared to an AI or technology interacting with it, during the pandemic, I remember listening to an online concert and thinking, what's giving me comfort right now is that this will never in existence replace a live concert, live music, being around people. Why do you think that is?
I think that I was talking to someone earlier, they were sharing a story about how they like to sit out by sorry, I'm going to answer your question, by the way. They like to sit out by the street and wave at the cars passing, and occasionally a car will honk at you, right? And it's like the best feeling ever because it's a stranger, and it's like, this person just did something nice for me momentarily, but it means so much, right? Because it shows you that you have camaraderie in your community, right? That person is on your side, even though you'd never know it. And I think that's really comforting for this ancient brain of ours that likes to feel like we have a tribe surrounding us that will protect us. And I think that there's probably something like that in concert going as well, where you're showing up to a place where everybody has this shared interest. Everybody's on the same page that you all love this artist that's about to perform. And then you get to revel in the beautiful experience of listening and losing yourself in the music. And I think that's gotta be like, there's something evolutionary about it, right? It's like your brain is flashing back 400,000 years and you're dancing around a fire with your tribe. I think there's something special about that because you feel safe in that community and you feel that they're your in-group. And that's a really big thing in psychology and in neuroscience as well, that brain treats people very differently depending on how you perceive them, whether you see them as a member of your tribe and part of your in-group or an out-group member. And unfortunately, those in the out-group get the short end of the stick by a landslide.
Always. So when we're talking about social interaction, are we talking, because when I think about this, I think about almost 4 domains, and I don't know if there's any framework for this. I think, of course, there's the interaction with other humans, but then there's also an interaction with nature, interaction with animals, and then an interaction with ourself. Are any of those other domains, is there any validity to those?
So as for nature, I'm not sure. Obviously, there's a research showing that like spending time in nature is good for your mental health, of course, and everybody can relate to this anecdotally. You go for a hike, it's wow, this is beautiful. Spending time with yourself is an interesting one. And it's unfortunately something that I don't touch on in the book. I guess I wish I had, just because you're making me think about it. And I don't really have much to say, frankly. I think there's a time and a place for it, right? Reflection, introspection, super important. I think for an average person, introspection, the process of looking inside yourself and evaluating your thoughts and opinions and everything, spending time alone should be a part of every single day. And I think it is for most people. But then as for time spent with animals, there is a good amount of research there, and particularly with dogs, showing that basically spending time with a dog is really good for you. And we already know this, right? Because you see pop-ups on college campuses where they bring in dogs and around finals week and everyone goes and pets a dog and de-stresses. But it's real. Like interacting with a dog can basically calm your nervous system. It can be really helpful. People who have dogs are at lower risk of cardiovascular disease and all sorts of things. And there's also research showing that interacting with a dog tickles the same brain systems that are involved in human interaction, and that can trigger oxytocin release and the social bonding, which can be really therapeutic and important. And I say all that with no disrespect to other animals. There's just not nearly as much research on animals that aren't dogs, because we have a deep evolutionary history with dogs and existing together and working together. So they've been studied the most. But there are other studies showing too that like just having a pet is good for you.
Because I've actually seen some patients where it's a real animal, but some actually have a little stuffed animal, a robot, and they seem like they're getting some value from that as well. Any insight in that?
Yeah, okay. So this is so fascinating because something I left out about the Getbot conversation is that I think perspective is massive. If you are comfortable interacting with a chatbot, and you can basically convince yourself that the input you get from this chatbot is as meaningful as another human, then I think you will benefit more. And there is some preliminary research showing basically that the people who do have friendships with AI chatbots report that it's good for them, while people who don't think it's bad for humans. So there's this like perspective barrier that you have to get over to make the most of it. And the example you just brought up of a child with a stuffed animal, what's the difference? It's like this stuffed animal is their friend. And if they can overcome that perspective hurdle of my imagination is telling me that this is my little friend and it goes with me everywhere and I can have conversations with it, it's probably providing some real semblance of connection and benefits for the brain and body. But then eventually you get to an age where sorry, my dog. But then eventually you get to an age where it's no longer, here's conveniently my dog on cue, chiming in to say, I should spend more time with her. But you get to an age where you're no longer interested in that relationship. And that's sad, but it's, again, another example of how that perspective can change, and it totally alters the way we interact with the being that we're viewing.
Now, you said that there is some evidence that shows that when we do physical touch, even with dogs, that it releases oxytocin, right?
Yeah.
Tell me the benefits of that.
All right. So oxytocin, I actually learned this while I was writing the book. Oxytocin has all of these unbelievable health benefits. So we typically think of oxytocin as like the love hormone, right? Like it helps, it's released when you have a child to help you bond with the child, right? In between romantic couples to help, it's like social glue in the brain. And that's definitely true. But oxytocin also has all these other systemic health benefits. It's been shown to be anti-inflammatory, neuroprotective. It can maybe help with stress and anxiety, particularly social stress. It's involved in wound healing. So if you have a cut on your arm or something like that, seems that oxytocin levels correlate with the speed of the healing of the wound. Bone growth, immune function, like oxytocin there's one study that they refer to it as nature's medicine because it's good for you. And the reason for that is probably because, again, I tend to think of everything in an evolutionary perspective because I'm always wondering, like, why, right? Like, why would oxytocin have all these benefits? And if you think about the fact that oxytocin is a signal of bonding, specifically romantic bonding or parent-child bonding, it's important that if you have a romantic partner, you are in good, strong physical fitness so that you can be successful at reproducing. And if you have a child, you need to be in strong physical fitness and good health to raise that child and protect it. So I think that when we are accompanied by others and we have oxytocin flowing, particularly when we're creating a family, that it's protecting our health and allowing us to stick around for longer. And by the way, so much amazing research. Like I said earlier, people who are isolated are more higher risk of death. Those who are married are like around 25 to 30% more likely to survive cancer if they're married. Like just so many incredible things about social connection. But anyways, dogs do the same thing. When there's studies showing that when humans look in the eyes of their dog, they show a surge in oxytocin. And by the way, so does the dog. So dogs probably love, which of course they have to, right? Because humans and dogs living together is favorable for survival. And so this oxytocin system, same system that the brain uses for parent-child bonds, may have evolved for dogs to stay close to us, and they need to feel good around us too, right? So this oxytocin is the social glue for them as well. And the evidence for that too comes from the fact that wolves don't show the same thing. If you look into the eyes of a wolf, they will not show an oxytocin surge, and neither will you. So it seems to be evolved in domestic dogs. Anyways, because of this likeness to human interactions, and even you could go as far as to saying parent-child bonds, there's a lot of reasons, scientific and otherwise, to believe that a caregiver-dog relationship is akin to a parent-child relationship. It may have a lot of great benefits for our health. And so one of the things that I like to propose is that older people should have dogs, because as we get older, we spend more and more time alone. And that loneliness corresponds with the period of life where we are at the highest risk for a bunch of health conditions, which is bad for all the reasons we talked about before. And so if you throw a dog in the mix, you might be able to supplement and replace some of that interaction and stave off some of the effects of loneliness.
So today we learned something remarkable, that friendship isn't just about having people to hang out with. It's actually changing our brains. and it can protect us from decline, lower our stress, and even in some cases, help us live longer. And when we connect deeply with someone else, our brains actually sync up in ways that scientists are only just beginning to measure. But here's the thing. If connection is so good for us, why does it feel so hard sometimes? Why do so many of us walk away from a conversation thinking, did I say something wrong? Do they even like me? And why do we underestimate how much other people actually enjoy being around us? Well, that's what we're going to explore in our next and final episode. The surprising science of likability, the mistakes our brain makes in social situations, and what the research really says about how to build stronger, more meaningful connections. So if this episode was about why our brains need friends, the next one is about how we can actually become better at making them. I'm Spencer Locke, and this is the Med Story Podcast. Join us for the final episode in our series, Why Our Brain Needs Friends, with Dr. Ben Rein.